Aliens is the sequel to one of the greatest science fiction horror movies of all time, if not the very greatest. This came out 7 years after Ridley Scott put his name on the map in Hollywood. And here we have James Cameron stepping up. He had just gotten off of doing the original Terminator movie 2 years prior to this. So he was already making a name for himself as a bona fide master, especially as it goes with the action genre. So after floating in space for 57 years, Lieutenant Ripley's shuttle is found by a deep space salvage team. And upon arriving at LD-426, the Marines find only one survivor, a young 9-year-old girl named Newt, played by Carrie Henn. But even these battle-hardened Marines with all the latest weaponry are no match for the hundreds of aliens that have invaded the colony. And come on, I know the crew is great in the original Alien. This one has freaking space marines. There's gigantic rocket launcher-sized guns that are being used. And even with the heaviest of artillery, the aliens are still so unstoppable. And to make it even more haunting, this title is plural. If you thought one alien was bad, how about a huge gigantic horde of hundreds of them? That should really strike fear in you. But joking aside, I wouldn't even argue that this is necessarily a horror movie. I really respect the approach that James Cameron took to directing this one. Because I'm sure he felt so intimidated to step into Ridley Scott's shoes and try and replicate what he did. So he didn't try to replicate it at all. Whereas Ridley Scott made a suspenseful thriller that happens to take place in space, James Cameron made an exciting action movie that takes place in space. Aliens is fucking awesome. And there are parts within me on certain days, not the alien that may be lurking inside of me or not that, but there's parts of me that thinks that this is better than the original. And I think that's just purely on an entertainment and enjoyment factor. This movie is a lot more adrenaline fueled. Alien blood is just spouting everywhere. People are getting torn in half by these creatures. These aliens look so damn intimidating. Again, how has nobody come up with a scarier alien design than this? Again, it's been over 40 years at this point, and I don't think anybody can come up with a scarier design. But yeah, I've already sat here gushing about the action, and we knew that James Cameron would make a phenomenal action movie out of this. The Terminator is one of the greatest action horror movies ever. This movie, I think, was a great follow-up for his career, and I think he did wonders directing this movie and making it stand almost in a league of its own. I really do think that when it comes to which of the first two Alien movies you prefer, it really does come down to personal preference. If you're more of a horror guy, you'll probably lean towards the first movie, but if you're more of an action junkie, Aliens should be where it's at for you. And if you like strong, badass female leads, Aliens is certainly your ticket. Because if Sigourney Weaver was great in the first movie, she only ups the ante here. She is a badass, not the lady you want to mess with, surely. And this is a woman who has seen a lot, she's done a lot in her life, she's done a lot in her career. And after 57 years in cryogenic sleep, here she is, and she looks like she hasn't aged a day. But believe it or not, Sigourney Weaver was actually nominated for Best Actress at the Academy Awards for her work on this movie. And that's pretty unheard of, because the Academy doesn't really recognize the action blockbusters all that much. So kudos to Sigourney Weaver for that. And when you rewatch Aliens with that understanding, you totally get it. This performance is magnificent. She gets every single story beat down to a T. She has great chemistry with every single performer that she shares the screen with. The crew in this movie is a lot of fun. You definitely feel the camaraderie between these guys. Just like the first Alien, this is a world that feels very lived in because of the people who inhabit it. And also because of the way they talk to each other. Like, I was never in the Marine Corps myself. I never went into the armed forces. My dad was in the Army, though. When I first watched this movie with him, he always loved watching the crew. I think this is mainly because this is how people who are in the armed forces jab with each other. And a lot of the scenes where you're introduced to the crew, like Bill Paxton, for example, Vasquez as well, is a really cool character. James Cameron decided to shoot a lot of those exposition scenes last. Because that way, you know, these actors have been on set with each other for a few months on end. They would have built bonds with one another. So those scenes, when you see those bonds, they're legitimate. Again, like Ridley Scott did in the original movie with some of his techniques, James Cameron came to play, man. And honestly, like, even just on this rewatch, it is so much fun to watch, and it can be so quotable sometimes. Get away from her, you bitch! Now, I mentioned it's gonna come down to personal taste which of the first two Alien movies you prefer. There are days where I think that Aliens is the better movie because it's more entertaining, but after rewatching both of them, I think my verdict is that the original Alien is the better movie. And some of you might know where I'm going with this. Let's get into the character of Newt. Now, Carrie Henn, very, very young, so I give her all the credit in the world, and I'm willing to give her a pass for the performance here, because I don't think this was her fault at all. And I don't know what it was, but on this rewatch specifically, I found myself incredibly annoyed by this character. It felt to me like Newt was just something for Sigourney Weaver as Ripley to save. Like, isn't having a cat in the original Alien movie enough? But I don't know, it feels like half of Newt's dialogue, at least in the theatrical cut, it feels to me like half of it is, Ripley! Ripley! Help me! Or she's screaming if she's not speaking. And I don't know if it works for me. I don't know, guys. I really don't know. Because I actually did some further research on this, and when you look at the director's cut of Aliens, there's a whole sequence where it's revealed that Ripley has a daughter who passed away while Ripley was in cryogenic sleep. And then when she comes across Newt, and she immediately builds a bond for her and immediately feels the need to protect her, because Ripley couldn't protect her own daughter by blood on Earth. Yeah, I get that. Why wasn't that in the theatrical cut? Because when I looked at it this way, without that context, Newt was just a plot device. But other than that, I really enjoy Aliens. I always feel so much joy whenever I go back and revisit the first two movies in the franchise especially, because both feel very distinct. Both each have their own flavors because you have different directors. It also feels like these two movies come from different genres. And it's amazing to me that this is the sequel to one of the greatest science fiction horror movies ever. And it holds its own in a completely different field. But yeah, great cast, great direction, great production design, phenomenal tension, intense action sequences to boot. I'm going to give Aliens an A. So yeah, final verdict, objectively speaking, I think the original Alien is the better film. But again, I think it all just boils down to what you like in your movies. Let me know if you prefer this movie over the original Alien down below in the comments, because I love what I do here. I love discussing all things in the cinematic world. We're talking all things Alien leading up to Romulus, which comes out in a couple weeks. I can't wait to see that. But now we see what happens when the studio interferes with an Alien movie. Just saying, Alien 3 was not David Fincher's fault. And I don't even count that as David Fincher's movie. But guys, y'all are the best. Again, thank you again so much. Stay tuned. And with all that being said, Back Talk, commence.